Hey everybody, this is Perch. I've been meaning to do this video for a little while. I took screenshots of it back in, it's like, a couple weeks ago. But there was this trending, tag on Twitter of bring back Tony Stark to life. It should be just bring Tony Stark back to life. Bring back Tony Stark to life. Who did this? Come on. Who's responsible for this? Thanks, Rob Bricken, for that. But basically, this idea of, for our beloved hero, please bring back Tony Stark to life. Tony Stark. And it was this billboard they put out, and it was like, we need Tony Stark back in the MCU. It won't go anywhere. I mean, I think Robert Downey Jr. has largely moved on. I think the cost of Robert Downey Jr. is probably too high. There's a lot of reasons why, bring back Tony Stark isn't going to happen. But anyway, this thing trends, and people are like, oh yeah, I love Tony Stark, man, that'd be great, and that's the majority of the comments. And then in comes various people saying, why would we bring back white male Tony Stark when Riri is coming? And then they post pictures of Ironheart. And this got a lot of retweets and quote tweets. I'm noticing the cap. So an interesting thing, if you look at these tweets, they look like, man, thousands of people are doing it. But they almost always settle between 1,400 and 1,600, almost to a note, whenever it's kind of these, what about the new generation of Marvel characters? And first off, for what it's worth, I have a vested interest in the new generation of Marvel characters doing great. I would love for them to do great. I want them to just sell, and more power to them. Let's have all these comics. Yes, please. The problem is they aren't. And as we're seeing from recent things like X Factor getting canceled and a lot of these books, I mean, the sales for Ironheart were dismal. We went through them a while ago with the numbers, and they were not good. I think Ironheart was well under 20,000. It's one of those things where I try and kind of explain to people, look, you shouldn't get so hung up on some of these comics because they don't sell. Like we're like, people will get really hung up on the Wasp. The Wasp is terrible. Look what it's doing to our children and to our society. And it's like, yeah, many of the comics sold under 7,000 copies. Like more than half. In its second run, because the title got a relaunch for 10 issues, only 3 comics four. Only 4 of the 10 issues were above 7,000. And many of them were down below 6,000. They were selling in the 5,000 range. It doesn't matter. At this point, it doesn't matter. But the interesting part, so this tweet goes out, and a bunch of retweets, and people are like, oh yeah. And what's funny is the comments and the retweets for this exceeds some of the sales for the actual comic. Yet, if I head on over to the pirate site, I see, oh, what's this? Ironheart has been downloaded over 800,000 times, or not downloaded, but viewed. And bear in mind, some people, I pointed this out for X Factor, and some people were quick to go, they're like, oh, but are those spiders? Are those people just looking at the first page and not clicking? I mean, who cares? That doesn't matter. That's not the point being made here. The point being made here is that there seems to be a dramatically higher amount of interest in the pirate stuff than the sold stuff. And whether that online interest, that pirate interest, is legitimate or not, it's kind of irrelevant. The relevant thing is it sold 5,000 copies. That's the relevant thing. How many people are looking online? I don't know. If I go on Twitter and I see all these tweets of people like promoting Kate Bishop and Riri Williams and these other characters, and there's like, a heart emoji, tons of retweets, thousands of likes. Cool. Just like the online pirated stuff, none of that equals sales. So it's not going to happen. Anyway, so this tweet comes out. There's another response to this, which I found the most charming of the whole debate, which somebody asks, what about that kid who helped Stark in Iron Man 3? We just going to sideline him for a female lead? And the response of, that kid was annoying AF. I'd be glad they forgot him. I don't know why. That whole dialogue was quite charming to me. Look, the challenge that we're having with legacy characters, and on the surface, if you're sitting around a boardroom table and you're saying, hey, we've had this Tony Stark character for going on 50, 60 years. And, you know, he may not be connecting with a new audience. At first, you might want to challenge that premise because Robert Downey Jr. was connecting with all kinds of people. So I don't think there's any problem with that. But if the argument is, hey, why don't we get somebody younger, kind of a next generation here and appeal to this new audience? This isn't a terribly original idea. We've seen it in cartoons, we've seen it in movies, we've seen all kinds of things. The idea of updating and refreshing a brand to appeal to a new audience is not new. The challenge is being successful at doing it. It's harder than you think. I think to a lot of people who brainstorm around a table, it's like, hey, let's make this new and hip and cool and all the rest. But the success ratio is really small. Why? Because people can kind of smell a knockoff character. And unfortunately, that's how it feels. It feels like a knockoff character, whether the person is Riri or Miles or any number, Amadeus Cho, whatever you're doing with these characters. It's hard to get around the feeling that this character is derivative, is not new, is not fresh. It's cheap. And this, again, if you go back to the 80s, you'll see plenty of examples of Saturday morning cartoons and other things where they try and kind of freshen up a brand. They've done it for almost everything, from G.I. Joe to Transformers, Alvin and the Chipmunks. I mean, you can go down the list, and there's been plenty of attempts to make it new and cool, and they rarely work out. It's not the fact that you got, hey, look, it's a girl now, or it's a black woman instead of a white man, or whatever. That's kind of secondary. They've tried just having a younger white dude replace an older white dude character, and it doesn't take. It's because it feels like a knockoff. It doesn't feel like the original. And the strange part about it is, even when they put it in front of kids who in theory have no emotional attachment to the original property, it still doesn't take. Kids have this weird way of just sniffing out that it feels derivative. It feels like not authentic. That's one of the weird disconnects. You see it with She-Ra, the new version they did. I saw this interesting article where they talked about, the culture war online was that the change to She-Ra was wrong. They introduced LGBTQ themes into it, and that turned people off, and there's like a big argument. But when they actually did focus groups and talked to viewers and asked them what they preferred, what they found was people didn't have a strong emotional attachment to the original She-Ra, which checks out. It's not like, those movies were selling like hotcakes and everybody was in love with the original She-Ra. That's not happening today. But people weren't embracing the new version either. Why? Well, in the focus groups, people didn't say, well, I don't like this diversity. I don't like this whole inclusion push. Feels natural. That wasn't what was said. What was said was, this feels like a knockoff character from the original. And P.S., we didn't really care about the original. That's interesting. It means that people are struggling to connect to these new characters. And the whole diversity mirage that a lot of people online like to get really up in arms about, either pro or against, is actually almost secondary. The problem is these characters don't feel authentic. They feel like they're derivative. And I think that's one reason why you look at characters like Jon Stewart and Rhodey from Iron Man, and you say, well, why were they successful then? Aha. They were introduced in a very organic, normal way to the book. Rhodey was a character in Iron Man for a long time before he suited up. And Jon Stewart came out, and they had the concept of the core, and they didn't make this as now newer, hipper, cooler. Jon Stewart, the old Hal Jordan, move over because we've got the new version. Yay! That wasn't how they sold it. That wasn't how the character came across. And so as a result, the character seemed to do better. Now, there are exceptions to this. Miles Morales found a niche with both the comic, I think largely because the replacement in Ultimate Spider-Man did work. I think they've screwed it up kind of since he came into the 616. I think it's been harder to differentiate where the character's coming from. But the Spider-Verse movie sold it well. So what was different there? Well, again, they introduced right off the bat and really cleanly this concept of the multiverse, and there's different versions of these characters, And so it never felt like a derivative ripoff. It felt like something new. It felt like something authentic. And as a result, people went for it. That tends to work. And I think that's the clue for why a lot of these things don't. I think that a lot of the screaming about, oh, she's a woman now and all the rest. I mean, Kate Bishop Hawkeye is actually a very good example, because here we're about to see this roll out in the MCU. And the question is going to be, are they going to introduce Kate Bishop naturally as this protege and somebody who can kind of take over for Clint, which is sort of how the comic originally worked a little bit, or are they going to do a lot of what the comic wound up doing during Kelly Thompson's role, where it was like, she's the better Hawkeye. This is the improved, new and improved and better. That's the stuff that always gets you into trouble. That's the stuff that starts to feel like a kind of marketing slogan as opposed to something normal. That's the trick. And I think this is where, if you're looking at some of these comics, why bring back Tony Stark to life when Riri is coming? These comments hurt the success of Riri, because it doesn't feel like this character is something new and authentic. It feels like this is a new and improved replacement. And time and time again, we've shown people don't like that. Not because they're offended about the original thing, but because they feel like they're getting a knockoff. They don't trust the marketing. Anyway, interesting little thing. I thought these tweets kind of summed up a little bit of what's going on. And if you look at these characters, that's the problem. I think the race stuff is a bit of a distraction. I think that it's an easy thing to get hung up on, but it's the feeling that these characters aren't authentic is the real problem. That's my opinion anyway. What's yours? Let me know in the comments below. Like and subscribe, and thanks for listening.